I don't know. I don't have any special insight, but I suspect she's probably positioning to run for president, would be my guess.
Hutch looked like he's been holding his breath since she started talking. I'm sorry, Hutch. I don't mean to just come for you like this, but I'm like, Jesus Christ, bro.
Okay, no, I have to comment on this. Like, look at my podcast co-hosts. Look at their beautiful faces, okay? Look at Pisco. Does he look super happy? You know, look at Josiah. Does he look super happy? Like, is my face any different from any of my co-hosts? These guys are rock hard for me, man.
And I think the big albatross for liberals, the one thing that holds them back is Hutch. The Hutch mentality, the destiny mentality, which is, oh, we can't do any of those things.
That's actually not what I think at all. I actually think that good things can happen and do happen when we elect Democrats and actually give them power. Okay, the boys from Vanguard decided, I mean, these guys, dude, these guys hate me. I would love to have them on the podcast. This is the second video they made about me. The first time they made the video about me, I'll just, whatever, I'll spill some tea or whatever, but like, Josiah is kind of friendly with these guys. I think Josiah's collaborated with them a few times. But the first time they went after me, it was about like me critiquing Kyle Kulinski, and they went so fucking hard, bro. Like, they went so hard. It got so personal. And I reacted to that video, and then like, if you looked at the comments section on that video that they did, it was like a lot of people that were like, you guys are kind of out of line. It was like so over the top. Well, you're talking about reforming ICE, or ICE, yeah, which everybody would agree with. But even when we go back to like the number back in 2018 was only a quarter of Democrats. This was during like the peak anti-Trump kind of pro-immigration wave, that pendulum swing. It was only a quarter of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. That's not to say that they had a favorable opinion of ICE. It says 57% of Democrats viewed the agency negatively for obvious reasons. There was like family separation at the time. It was horrible. But when AOC is asked this question, she's going to have to give like a substantive answer for what that actually looks like. And
look, I hear your concerns on the political point. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it will be popular by the time we get to the end of like the horrors of this administration. I can just tell you that I think they've been vindicated, and I think they were correct. I think it's a rogue agency, and this gets back to like the big.
I mean, but we're talking about political strategy. Like, that's super important. But yeah,
Vanguard will be there, sir.
Yeah, let's do crystal ball. Let's shout out to...
It's just the fact that like defunding ICE is wildly unpopular. There's like, you cannot win the presidency if you're running on a platform of defund ICE. But I feel like a lot of lefties, they feel like that's the only morally good position to have, that we need to defund it. And so you have to stick to that. And if you stray from that, you're straying from your morals. But you can't ignore, you know, declaring support for the impact of declaring a support for a policy that polls at like 8%. It's just, you obviously cannot run on that if you want to become president. You can run on that in a D+50 district. You can run on that in a D+40 district. You can't run on that if you're running for president. It is just impossible if you want to win an election. And I mean, I wouldn't even say that defunding ICE is the only morally correct thing to do. I don't think that's true. I think we can reform ICE. We can institute reforms. And I don't know about you guys, but I trust ICE under a Democratic president than I do Donald Trump. You know, like, I wasn't worried about Biden doing family separation policies when he was in charge of ICE, you know.
A KB, good friend of the show. She went on Live and Learn.
Yeah. Shout out to Krystal for stopping by Live and Learn, which is a live stream hosted by our friend of the show, Josiah, who obviously is the creator and host of the Ponder in Politics channel. Either way, let's take a look here. I thought Krystal did a great job on this. And yeah, shout out to Josiah. Like I said, big fan of Ponder in Politics. We've had our beef with Hutch. I don't know if any of you guys remember that episode, but that was pretty funny. Not to necessarily
Hutch tried to come after me the other day because I tweeted that Joe Biden should have canceled student debt, and he was like, excuse me, bro, did you know that the Supreme Court shot that down? And I was like, bro, if you never heard of executive orders, that thing that Donald Trump's using all the time to destroy our fucking country, use your brain, dummy.
Either way, we have mostly positive feeling towards the people on this panel.
We already unpacked that yesterday, but you know, it was an executive order that the Supreme Court shut down. So, you know, okay, I genuinely don't know what he is proposing. You know, just like ignore the Supreme Court, or just keep doing like slightly different executive orders that just keep getting slapped down by the Supreme Court. Like, I don't really understand. I don't really understand what he's saying here, to be honest.
besides Hutch, you know, who, like I said,
that's true though. The impression is pretty spot on. I do sound like that, I have to say.
We've had some beef with, but you know, I thought this was a good setting for Krystal to enter. Obviously, these guys are unabashed liberals. You know, they're not as left wing necessarily as us. But I was like, that'll make for an interesting dynamic. You know, it's not just Krystal talking.
I would say Econoboy is probably closer to a SOCDEM, and which, I mean, can you be liberal and a SOCDEM? Or are these two distinct things? Isco might even be a SOCDEM. Josiah is definitely a progressive liberal, I think. Yeah, I feel like a SOCDEM is distinct from liberal, right?
Talking to people that she agrees with on everything. That would be boring, right? So, you know, made for some potential friction. Let's see if any of that develops. And I think Krystal did a great job here. Really defending not only some of the more radical left-wing politicians like AOC, but also some of their messaging, some of which in particular has been quite vindicated. So let's take a look at this, Zach.
Do you think, speaking of AOC and
important, and on all those fronts, I'm actually pretty hopeful.
do you think, speaking of AOC and obviously Econoboy, please go if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. But on the topic of AOC, do you expect that she will try to challenge Chuck Schumer in 2026, or that she'll keep her powder dry for a presidential run in 2028? Because people have been speculating about both. And I'll say, just as far as Schumer's concerned, there's at least some preliminary polling indicating that she might do pretty well against him.
I think she would. And this,
Schumer's up in 28. In 28, he's up.
Oh,
that's what I thought.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought it was 26.
I don't know. I don't have any special insight, but I suspect she's probably positioning to run for president, would be my guess. And especially with, you know, you had the thing that really convinced me. I don't know if you guys saw a few weeks back, she put out some like highly produced, almost like
Video
presidential
from
launch
Idaho.
video that had Bernie Sanders really
We
like
talked about that.
kind of endorsing her. You know, he's clearly handing the movement off to her. And I'm
Yeah, maybe positioning herself for a Senate run. I mean, I do think that she has a decent chance. Obviously, if the trend holds, but like I do think if she has a decent chance of primarying Schumer in 2028, or maybe she could choose to run for governor. Like, when's the governor race? Is that 2026 as well? Oh, that's actually in 2026. So I don't know if I don't know if that's likely then. I feel like we probably would have had some indication that she was going to do that by now. But yeah, running for a more senior leadership in the House, like, you know, majority whip, or I mean, I guess speaker, but like, I don't know. I think she would have a tough time getting the votes to become speaker. That seems a bit far-fetched to me. There's a lot of establishment moderate type Democrats in the House that would not vote for her. But she could fill Schumer's seat for sure. That seems so much more likely. I don't think she's gonna run for president. I mean, that just seems like so way too ambitious. You know,
someone who up until very recently, I would have been extremely skeptical of that for her. I think she went too far in the direction of, like, you know, the woke language and the faculty, like all the kind of like off-putting focus on identity politics. I think she went too far in that direction.
I'll just let her run. Actually, you know,
I'll
just let her run.
Has impressed me
until we get to like 6.5 minutes.
Why does Hutch look like he's been holding his breath since she started talking? I'm sorry, Hutch. I don't mean to just come for you like this, but I'm like, Jesus Christ, bro.
Okay, no, I have to comment on this. Like, look at my podcast co-hosts. Look at all of them. Look at their faces. Look at their beautiful faces, okay? Look at Pisco. Does he look super happy, you know? Look at Josiah. Does he look super happy? Look at Econoboy. Like, is my face any different from any of my co-hosts? These guys they have such a fucking boner for me, bro. These guys are rock hard for me, man. They see me and the blood just starts going right to their wieners, man. They have such a boner for me.
Zach hasn't even been paying attention
Should be
to anything Krystal
flattered.
said. He's just been hyper focused on Hutch.
It's just that meme of the guy who's
We know.
like, trying to hold in a cough, you know, at the lunch table. It's
or a
like,
fart. Yeah. No, I don't know. He looks pissed. He doesn't look like he's a fan of Krystal.
no, he's definitely not. He's a little Destiny sycophant.
Oh my goodness.
direction. I think she has really stepped into the void in a way that has impressed
We
me.
did say we were going to do a Destiny
in
counter, okay?
2.0,
So
in
we
a
did
way
get
that
to
not
2.
many people have. I think the messaging has been spot on.
We'll do that, okay?
Clearly
We'll do a
the
Destiny
energy
counter
is
here.
there.
How many times are they going to mention
So,
Destiny?
You know, I'm more intrigued by that for her than I would have ever expected to be.
Well, with Kamala, I feel like that was arguably her biggest problem, is because she was clearly pivoting to the center, but she had this established, like she ran like to the left of Bernie Sanders in 2020, and a lot of people felt like her shift was disingenuous. That was the perception, and so for someone like AOC, who there are so many other like quotes of her, taking these like very left wing positions. Like if that was the thing that did in Kamala, what is AOC going to have to do to sort of like shed that baggage?
Well, I would say they're very different characters. I mean, just in terms of political.
Before Krystal answers, I was just going to say that's not what did in Kamala. Her being like too left wing is definitely not what did her in. If anything, not having any ideological fucking belief or policy to run on in the first place is what did Kamala in. Like throughout the campaign, people were like, "What the fuck are you?"
I said I was going to let it run, but if you guys weren't here yesterday, I should add some context. I did not say that she lost because she was too left-wing. I said she lost because she was perceived as inauthentic, because she ran more left-wing in 2020 and then ran as a moderate in 2024 and didn't really have like great answers for why that shift occurred. And then they end up just sort of like, they end up landing on exactly what my logic was. But, the hate boner is so strong with these guys that I don't know if their minds are like, if their minds are just going 1,000 miles an hour when they listen to me and they can't fully process like what I'm saying.
Running on. Remember, it was like Kamala for the people, but there was no like actual policy behind her campaign in the way that Bernie had policies, in the way that other people, Andrew Yang had UBI. Kamala wasn't running on anything other than just like, I'm a generic progressive that also happened to be a prosecutor.
Yeah, in 2020, absolutely by no metric was she running to the left of Bernie Sanders. For one, okay, she might have used more woke language, and Krystal charitably just like brushed that aside. But that's obvious lunacy to begin with. On the other side of that, could you imagine being a person who defended her parading out Liz Cheney and said that was strong, sage advice from her campaign staff, and then turn
I'd do it again, for the record,
around 5 months after, or 6 months, 7 months, however long we are after election, and say, oh, she ran too far to the left? Are you freaking kidding me, Hutch? Use your brain. Use your brain. You didn't consult with Destiny because he didn't fucking.
Okay, that's 2 on the Destiny counter. We have 2 Destiny counters.
Clever.
We have 2 on the Destiny counters. I predicted 7. They would bring him up 7 times.
They're very different characters. I mean, just in terms of political talent, I think anyone would have to acknowledge like they're not even in the same.
Use your brain, as they straw man the shit out of me and accuse me of saying something that I didn't say.
League in understanding of media and the new media ecosystem, they're not even in the same league. And then the other thing is with
and perceived
Kamala,
authenticity, not to interrupt, but perceived authenticity too. That
correct.
A lot of like Trump.
That was my point. Was the perceived authenticity? That was exactly my point.
See in Trump, people say that although Trump's the biggest liar in any politician in modern history, they see that these people are genuine.
Right, and I think that is the key point, because people with Kamala, she's just like, even within her own campaign in 2020, you say she ran to the left of Bernie Sanders. It's like, well, which part of the campaign are we talking about? She launched being like, I'm for Medicare for all. And then some donors were like, well, don't do that. And she's like, I'm not for Medicare for all. It was
Vishy with another gifted sub. Vishy, thank you.
That her goal was to get herself into office, and that she
only raised her hand for Medicare for all half-assed and then immediately took it down. And it was Bernie Sanders left alone saying that he wanted.
I mean, that was a really bad moment for Kamala. Like the first, was it the first debate? The first debate, they asked all the debate panelists, is that what you say? All the candidates. How many of you guys think that we should eliminate private insurance? And I think it was just her and Bernie raising her hand. And her campaign after the fact said, oh, no, she didn't mean that. But it's like, how do you accidentally raise your hand when someone asks that question? I don't know how you could have heard the question wrong, but yeah, that was kind of, that was just like, that was kind of weird, and she really stalled out after that first debate. Like she just, she ended up suspending her campaign because she just couldn't raise any more funds. Like the donor money dried up because people just didn't think that she had a chance. So yeah,
the legitimate, actual, authentic Medicare for all package.
Yep, 100%. And even Tulsi then eventually changed her plan to be like, single payer plus or whatever the
Yeah,
fuck.
she did that. Mine's based off the Australian tiered system, which is kind of dog shit.
Probably still better than ours.
Oh, way better than ours, but it's like, why would you start from scratch there? They created a tiered system where poor people get less quality healthcare. The whole point of universal healthcare is that everybody gets great, exceptional care because there's no tier system for it.
Yeah, that's a good point, bro. Like, I'm the Destiny sycophant when and I'm not calling my other my podcast co-hosts sycophants. Don't just be clear about what I mean here. But Pisco and Econoboy and Josiah, I think they all collaborated with Destiny more than I did. For me and Destiny, it was like we spoke. I mean, I did an in-person event with him in Wisconsin for a canvassing event. And then throughout the year, we spoke maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Maybe less, maybe only 2 times. I'm not really sure, but it was not a lot. We didn't, but they don't like my politics, so I'm a Destiny sycophant. It's just okay, whatever
For it.
Yep. It is true though that, I mean, it is true that Kamala did go through that brief period of hyper virtue signaling where she was like that. That was where that clip emerged of her saying that yes, we should fund surgery for trans migrants at the border. You know, the one they used against her in 2024. Like, it is true she went through like 6 months of like really performative virtue signaling. But again, the problem is not that she was saying left-wing positions. It's how obviously inauthentic it was. People were like, bro, you were just a cop.
Wicked, what's up,
You
man?
were just this fucking vicious.
You laughed at
neoliberal-
marijuana legalization.
Exactly.
You tried to put moms in jail.
Yeah, don't pretend that now you're, oh, I was, smoking doobies listening to Snoop Dogg.
You laughed at marijuana legalization. Is that true? Majority of marijuana cases prosecuted under Harris occurred during her role as the district attorney for San Francisco from 2004 to 2010. While her office prosecuted slightly more than 1,900 marijuana convictions during this time, most were downgraded to misdemeanor charges, if even charged at all, and very few were actually sent to state prison. In fact, as district attorney, Harris championed a policy that people should not serve jail time for marijuana conviction. And her office often embraced alternative measures such as drug treatment programs for individuals with low-level convictions. Harris famously laughed when a reporter asked her about her opponent's support of cannabis legalization, saying that he was entitled to his opinion. She also declined to support California's legalization ballot measure, which voters ultimately approved in 2016. While Harris's past history on cannabis was certainly not one that suggested advocacy for cannabis reform, she seemed to shift gears rapidly over the last few years. Suddenly, she was voicing support for cannabis legalization and even talking about her own experiences with the drug. And it wasn't just talk, she co-sponsored multiple bills aimed at improving things for the cannabis industry and those impacted by the war on drugs. This is about her time in the Senate. Okay. But it does appear to be the case that when she was Attorney General, they did not generally put people in jail for low-level marijuana offenses. That appears to be the case. And that was 15 years ago.
Michael. Dude, do you remember when she lied about
Yes,
Snoop Dogg?
that's what I just referenced.
Yeah.
When she was in college before Snoop Dogg even like put out a single album. Yeah, hilarious. But either.
Okay, we have to fact check this. That might be right. Kamala Harris age, 60 years old. So she would have been in college. What's the math here? 48 years. No, 42 years ago. So 2023. Yeah, that's true. Snoop Dogg would not have been around, right? Okay.
Right. That's why she flopped. I actually do think that an authentic left-wing progressive could get away with saying a lot of kind of like bold, like, things that would sound unhinged to your average normie American in the same way that Trump got away with doing that, but just in a fascist way. Again, it just has to be someone authentic, someone who's not obviously phony.
And the reason that Kamala Harris tried to present herself as like woke instead of somebody that was really committed to actual economic revolution like Bernie Sanders was because one, Bernie Sanders had kind of taken the positioning that he was going to lean very much into class issues and, not like he always held the 10 toes down on LGBTQ issues, but it wasn't so much the focal point of his campaign. I think that Kamala Harris was trying to capture some of the energy that Bernie Sanders had behind him while making it a little bit more like corporate friendly, a little more like Silicon Valley pride flag.
That's right.
Not that
I think that's right.
Standing up for LGBTQ rights isn't important, but
there's a way to do it and a cringy way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think she often kind of felt on the cringy side, given the fact that we already know her history as
I agree. I agree with them here. I think they're right about that.
she didn't have a lot of core views that she was willing to fight for. And so I don't doubt, Hutch, that there will be, quotes from AOC, abolish ICE, although I think that was kind of.
She never actually said that she listened to Snoop Dogg in college. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. The quote refers to an interview Harris did in February 2019 with The Breakfast Club, a morning radio show about black culture, politics, and more. Host Charlamagne the God and DJ Envy asked Harris questions on various topics. The full interview can be seen, blah, blah, blah. In the interview, Charlamagne asks Harris if she ever smoked marijuana. Harris responds that she has. Later in the interview, DJ Envy asks Harris what music she listens to. Before she had a chance to answer, Charlamagne the God interrupts by asking what music Harris listened to while smoking marijuana in college. Harris laughs but ignores Charlamagne the God's question and responds to the original query of what music she listens to by saying Snoop Dogg, Tupac, and adds she even loves Cardi B. Fake news, fake news, fake news.
Vindicated in this moment, but that's another discussion. But she has been out on a limb on all those issues, and I don't doubt that those are going to be things that she's going to have to grapple with in a primary. But I don't see her running away and completely like changing her whole all her colors in this moment either. Like people feel like, okay, she's a progressive, like that's basically who she is, and so that authenticity piece I think is important. We actually Josiah did some focus group testing of those AOC Trump voters. And it was,
shout out to Griffin.
It was very, very interesting. A surprising number of them told us that they felt like there was just this sort of like general anti-establishment kind of a vibe of like, oh, they're both critical of their own parties. And then a lot of them actually talked about how they thought that they were pro-peace and anti-war, and that there was one woman.
I think it's really important that we grapple with all of this because the way that online commentators, pundits, people like you guys in chat who really, really pay attention to politics, the way we analyze politicians, the way we look at issues, the way that we make our assessments is often very different than the way regular ass people who don't spend all of their time thinking about politics do. So when Krystal says here, like, oh yeah, they both kind of had this idea that they were anti-war about them, right? Donald Trump will say, oh, we need to stop spending all of our money on war. AOC will say, oh, yeah, of course, I don't support this war, like free Palestine, all of these kinds of things. And if you're not actually familiar with what's happening in politics, you just think, yeah, most politicians are all liars. Yeah, most politicians are all corrupt. But hopefully they'll do this one thing that they keep talking about, and then you're done thinking about it. So it's like, I wanted the end of the war, so I voted for AOC. Donald Trump also said he'd end the war. I don't know about these other guys, so I didn't vote for them. Kind of a deal. That's how a lot of people process their decision making, which is interesting.
Yeah. And I think something we have to grapple with as much as we care about policy and Medicare for all and stuff, like I think a lot of those voters, they like AOC more for her attitude and her vibe than any specific policy she represents. They like the fact that she's feisty. They like the fact that she speaks her mind.
Do we have national numbers for AOC's popularity? US poll, AOC popularity, 45%, disliked by 24%, 15% neutral. Honestly, those are decent numbers. That's what YouGov says. I don't doubt that AOC and Bernie right now are popular with Democrats. I think Democrats are looking for people that are like fighters, they want to feel inspired. And AOC and Bernie lean into the populist stuff, which kind of serves those kinds of needs. But I don't think we have a lot of polls right now about like national numbers for AOC. But if we just take YouGov at face value for what they're saying, they have her at like 45%, which, that is not horrible, but it doesn't indicate that she's like broadly popular. Yeah.
And again, that's the same thing they like about Donald Trump, is the fact that they kind of view him as feisty and the fact that he speaks his mind, even though he's a fucking lying, degenerate piece of shit, right? But I think that is a big thing. Like people really do like the attitude. They like charisma. It's a gut check thing. They don't give a fuck about necessarily what policies you're proposing. They give a fuck about like, their perceived character. Not that people don't care about.
AOC is like 26% of respondents view her as the face of the Dem party. 22%, or was it 26, do not think someone is the face, and then it goes lower. I wonder though, like I suspect that probably a larger percentage of Republicans think that AOC is the head of the Democratic Party than actual Democrats. Like, does that make sense? I think there's a decent chance that like more Republicans actually think that than Democrats, but I could be wrong about that.
about policy. Obviously they do. But I'm just saying, like, look at Obama. He was actually pretty vague when it came to his political agenda. It's not like he really said a lot of specific plans, but he had this air about him that people
they want AOC to be the head, easier to vilify. Yeah, that's exactly my point.
were like, oh yeah, this guy is a change maker. He has a vibe that we are attracted to in the current moment. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no, that's actually a great point. What were the things that Obama ran on? Hope, change, healthcare reform. Right? What are we going to do?
In peace.
Oh, and peace. Yeah, you're right. That was a big thing, which he also didn't fucking deliver on. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize, and he took us to 5 new wars. It's absolutely insane that happened. But you're right. He would be like, hope, change. No. Do we believe that we can be greater than we are today? I do. I believe in change. I have hope for the country. And that was it, right? It was a nice idea. And
how old are these guys? Did they get to stay on their parents' insurance until they were 26 because of Barack Hussein Obama? I'll bet you $5 they did.
he was a statesman. He was an obvious diplomat.
I had to find my own insurance when I was 21 years old. Okay? I didn't get that. And that would have helped. Seriously, that would have helped so much. I had a lot of teeth problems. My teeth were just a mess when I was young. And I didn't have insurance, so I didn't go to the dentist. And anybody knows, if you have a toothache and you don't go to the dentist, that shit is going to turn into a $2,000 root canal if you don't get it covered. But if you don't have enough money to do something about it right away, what do you do? You know, I was on my own. Were these two people on their parents' insurance until they were 26 years old? Probably. Thanks, Obama. I don't know how old they are. They look pretty young. I'm going to say late 20s.
Diplomat. He was so good on the mic. He just made you believe anything that he was saying if you wanted to believe it.
Yep. Left-wing Reagan.
Woman who's even telling us how like similar she thought AOC and Trump was, which is, you know, hard for me to wrap my head around. But that was the feedback we got from these AOC Trump voters in her district.
Well, one thing
This is
I
in
think you all are
Queens, where she
forgetting,
outperformed
though,
Kamala, right?
Yes, dramatically. Yeah.
one thing I think you all are forgetting though is that she danced that one time, and it's on video. So sorry guys, I think that's the end of her career. I mean, it's that, you know, it's funny. I got thinking about that. Like even just on stupid superficial level, you know, Trump's stupid dance that went viral and was imitated by like right-wing figures and whatever. I almost wonder if like AOC could even weaponize that, like just like, you know, totally like pull like an Aikido move and redirect the momentum about that. She just has so much natural.
Somebody in Live and Learn chat said, define the far left. I think I can give a really concise, elegant response to that. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. If you had to pick one belief to sum up the far left, what would you guys say? I'm just curious what you guys think. The question for the YouTube chat and the Twitch chat is, define the far left in one sentence with one idea. Actually, in YouTube chat, the very first chatter got it right. I think you can define the far left broadly by just saying simply that they are anti-capitalist. I think that would be a good, you know, because if you're a progressive liberal and you want things like subsidized healthcare and paid family leave and this kind of thing, you know, that's like a pretty mainstream position. Like if we're doing far left, like the fringe of the left, then I think that there's a lot of things that it's not just, I mean, obviously they focus a lot on like colonialism and imperialism and power structures and the police state. And, you know, they have many, many issues that they focus on, but I would say the unifying sort of through line would be anti-capitalism. They think that capitalism is something that needs to be not reformed. It needs to be ended. Like that's what I think. That's how I would define the far left. You know, if you want to get into the far left, then you're getting into like accelerationism, hastening the demise of the republic so that the conditions for revolution are more sort of like fertile. That would be like the fringe super far left. But the far left, I think, would be like anti-capitalism. How would you define the far right? I mean, the concept is kind of difficult to describe on the right, because I do think that the right has become, that movement has become far right in nature, you know? So like, how do you describe something as far right when 20 or 30% of the country subscribes to that kind of thinking? But I don't even know if that's true. I mean, I would describe the far right as like their unifying belief is an appetite for a dictator. I think that would be I would say you're far right if you think that if you think that Trump should ignore the Supreme Court and, he should run for a third term. And, I would say like that. It used to be far right would be sort of Timothy McVeigh types, militia types, small government, don't tread on me, which very oftentimes would overlap with stuff like racism, white supremacy, like super misogyny, Hutch had to run, didn't get to finish my point last week or whenever it was. My point was building a coalition is great. However, Krystal and these weird far lefties have their own. Well, I think there's some people that I want to build coalitions with, people that I have disagreed with in the past. And then there's some people that I don't think it would be a useful exercise. I'm kind of like testing the waters with Krystal. Like Kyle Kalinske is a really good example because he's just like full bore 24/7 going after Trump right now. And, he's saying stuff like resistance libs were totally vindicated. And it's like, okay, I will take that. So if you want to be, if we want to be on the same page about opposing Republicans right now, and obviously he has a massive platform. So I think that's very useful. I don't really keep up with Krystal stuff as much. I don't pay a lot of attention to either. But as far as like the Vanguard guys go, I'd be happy if they wanted to build a coalition with me, but I don't think it's going to happen. So yeah, anyways.
Real talent and an ability to engage with people, I think, in an authentic way. So I'm excited to see where she goes. And plus, if you actually see her in congressional hearings, she's ferocious. Like you can hear
sharp. Yeah.
You can hear the sphincters of the people she's about to question just clench shut.
And by the way, that's so true. And that's actually a big part of the reason why my tone towards AOC has become a little bit more positive, because I actually have watched some of those, and she does absolutely kick ass. She understands.
That gives you sort of an indication as to why I don't think it would be a productive exercise to necessarily go out of my way to try to build a coalition with these two guys, because he just indicated that he has stopped. There's a particular kind of lefty. Okay. If we want, okay, here's another way that we can define the far left. I think it's safe to say that someone is far left if they have soured on AOC. If you are a part of a left-wing space and you and all your peers think that AOC is like a sellout, these are the same people, for example, that would say things like Bernie was the compromise. Bernie was the compromise is so funny to me, because that is just not true. Okay. He was their champion. He was their O'Baron. He wasn't a compromise. He just said that Israel had a right to exist and defend themselves. And they just flipped. Or he endorsed Biden. And they were like, how could you? How could you endorse Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton? Because he's not an idiot. And he recognized how bad Trump was. And that was a bridge too far for these people, because they obviously don't understand how bad he was.
She's like one of the few people that makes watching C-SPAN not boring as fuck. You know what I'm saying? And that's what leftists need in our politicians, because we have a lot of politicians who are good people, their heart's in the right place, they're serious people, but they don't know how to be telegenic. They don't know how to command a camera or a crowd. And I think AOC does. And it proves that she'll be great in debate settings against these Republicans. If you actually watch some of these congressional hearings where she's really, asking tough questions, right? As Josiah is talking about, he's 100% correct. And it proves that she is a serious politician, not just, good social media star like some people want to reduce her to.
She's learned from Bernie Sanders, right? She spent a ton of time with that guy. And that is a guy that will not let you off the hook during a committee hearing. That is a guy that will not let you off the hook when you've been brought before Congress.
Terror. As soon as they sit down, it's like, oh, fuck. I just love it.
Just what I'm done with is this useless consultant class that needs to airbrush everything. They need to workshop every answer like they did for Kamala, where you really feel like when you're asking or when Kamala's answering the question that she's going through all of the canned answers that this useless consultant.
It's an interesting question. I don't know if we should just not do focus groups. I don't know if we should not actually talk to voters and sort of get a sense for how certain slogans land. And I think that's probably a useful exercise. The risk is that if you try to completely optimize every single aspect of your campaign, then I think you just, at some point you start to become very inauthentic. So I think if you're going, do the focus groups, that's fine. But I think politicians need to find a way to work it into their rhetoric in a way that sounds more authentic. Like with Hillary Clinton, for example, she sounded like every time she opened her mouth, she sounded like everything was super optimized by focus groups and very selective like slogans. And someone like Pete, for example, I think he does that really well, where like he, you know, you can tell that he's going for a particular kind of messaging because he's seen the same polls that we're talking about, but he does it in a way that I think comes across as still authentic. And I think authenticity in the 21st century is just like a currency, like especially in the era of social media. It's just there's a how authentic somebody is. I think it really matters to especially like younger people. Yeah,
Classic gets paid millions and millions of dollars, gave to her. I think they're useless. I would much rather trust like AOC on Instagram Live. I mean, we have that confidence that she can do those kinds of appearances and won't completely fuck it up. Whereas, you know, do you have any confidence that Kamala Harris or Jerry Connolly or Joe Biden or any of the octogenarians, if we threw them onto Joe Rogan,
Jerry Connolly, RIP,
that they could perform? No, I think
he was dead already.
Calling for less consultants and more authentic people.
Last night, right?
Look at the camera and actually say.
I'm excited to see Pelosi on flagrant.
I wish people would stop being so weird when people die. You know, like you don't have to crack jokes when someone like Jerry Connolly, who has been, you know, a very decent man, has a very good track record, voting record or whatever. I wish people would stop being weird about it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's graphic.
I mean, unironically,
unironically, though, I think that's a good litmus test. Like, if your candidate isn't prepared to sit down for like a 3-hour long form interview, then maybe they're not the move.
You supported Joe Biden.
Yeah,
right.
Not in this era.
Too much has changed. I did not have a choice. Joe Biden was the guy. Okay, he was the guy. I did not support him in the primaries in 2020. Once he became the nominee, it was very obvious to me, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to vote for Biden. Right. Shock Doctor with 2 months. At what point do you hold firm in beliefs? Well, I mean, listen, it is a function of democracy that the people that are elected to represent their constituents and their voters are going to reflect those voters' wishes and demands. You know, you can run on your beliefs and your principles or whatever, but I don't know what that means if you're, you know, running for a seat in like an R+2 district in fucking Colorado. You know, like politicians, like this is what the promise of democracy is, like a government of the people, by the people, for the people, you know. So you can have like thought leaders and sort of like cultural linchpins. People like MLK and Malcolm X and like, you know, very prominent, relevant social commentators, activists, etc. But when you're a politician, your job is to reflect the will of your voters. And so, you know, like you can't ignore what your voters are asking for. Otherwise, they will not reelect you generally. Generally speaking, like politicians do kind of like decently reflect what their voters are asking them for. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very long career if you keep making votes that your community or your district or your state don't approve of. They will vote you out. Like, that's what a democracy is. And so I think that I view these things as like separate projects. Like, you can have certain very rare politicians that come around and they inspire hope and faith and change. And they inspire people to more towards like progress. Like that happens, but it's not like every single time, you know? So you have like a separate group of people that are doing the business of like activism and changing people's minds and opening their minds to new kinds of policies. And then you have politicians whose basically their job it is to represent their constituents. So, you know, like a democracy doesn't really function if that's not happening. So if tomorrow every politician started to, you know, do votes that like most of their constituents disagreed with, that's how governments get overthrown eventually. Because the people feel like they don't accurately reflect the will of the people. Aplo as me says status quo Hutch. I don't know if that's a troll or if you're being serious about that. I am not saying that we should always do the status quo. Like, I am a progressive. I believe in progressive policies. In the case of 2020, I didn't really have a choice. I mean, I did have a choice. I voted for Bernie in California. That was my choice to support him in California during the primaries. Joe Biden ultimately won the nomination, and so he was the guy. And then, you know, I knew he was going to run for re-election, so I just made peace with that. He's the guy, you know, in 2024. He was the guy. And then he dropped out, and Kamala was the guy, and I didn't have a choice in that either. But, you know, I thought she was a really good debater. I mean, I did like the policies that she proposed. Building more housing is good. You know, helping first-time home buyers was good. Her tax policy was better than Donald Trump. Her Gaza policy was better than Donald Trump. Like, you know, like I liked generally what she was talking about. It was apparent that she was rough around the edges, like in interviews. Like that made me nervous. But she was the guy. I didn't have a choice. And so, like, the difference between these guys, I guess, and me is like, I will support the Democratic nominee. I'm always going to support the Democratic nominee. Never say never. I don't know. Some crazy shit might happen in the next 10 years. Who knows? AI is going to come in and change everything, and who the knows? You fall in line. Okay, now I don't know if you're bro. I think if you don't recognize the threat of Donald Trump and you don't take meaningful action to stop him from becoming president, you are falling in line with MAGA. Do you not realize this? You are falling in line. You are the one enabling Donald Trump to win. Meaningful action was supporting loser Dems. Meaningful action is voting in opposition to Donald Trump. Yeah. Do you like what you see, what's happening right now? I don't know how bad things need to get for you. Ooh, I gotta, hold on. I don't know how bad things need to get before you guys start to understand the stakes. I don't know how bad things need to get, because it's already escalated to a degree that I didn't even expect it to happen this fast. Oh, vote blue no matter who. Yeah, that is unironically the best thing that you could do right now. Unironically, is to vote blue no matter who. Unironically, I will vote for whoever the nominee is in 2028. I don't care who it is. If the party, let's take this to the extreme. If the party decided that John Fetterman was going to be the nominee in 2028, I would vote for John Fetterman. If the party decided that Kyrsten Sinema was the nominee in 2028, I would vote for Kyrsten Sinema. Not happily, okay? If it was Stephen A. Smith, I think so. Yeah. It's hard to imagine it getting worse than if it was Vance. Maybe it would be worse, but decent chance it would be better than if Stephen A. Smith won over Vance or Don Jr. I live in California. It doesn't matter. This is what you guys always do, okay? I press you and I press you and I press you, and then you say stuff like this. Well, my vote doesn't count. Just stand on business, okay? Stand on business. We're never going to get past this video. The landscape has just changed way too much. And I feel like that was like on full display in 2024 in a way that was not on display in any of the other years. It was just so important. But like, to the point of AOC, what is this? What is this? What is this gesticulating that he's doing? What is this? Unironically, though, I think that's a good litmus test. Like, if your candidate isn't prepared to sit down for like a 3-hour long form interview, then maybe they're not the move.
You supported Joe Biden.
Yeah,
right.
Not in this era.
Too much has changed. The landscape has just changed way too much. And I feel like that was like on full display in 2020. He's like, what am I taking, crazy pills? Like, well, he was the fucking nominee. What did you want me to do? That's the difference between me and you. He was the guy. And I was like, okay, he's the guy. It is what it is. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any power in the Democratic Party. Okay. I can't influence the decision. I can vote in a primary and that's it. And then once the nominee is settled, out of my hands. And at that point, obviously the obvious choice for me was Joe Biden. Just like it was just couldn't have been an easier vote, you know, literally the easiest vote of my life in 2020 and 2024 and 2016. It was just so obvious. 24 in a way that was not on display in any of the other years. It was just so important. But like, to the point of AOC, what is this thing that he's doing? What is this? I am criticizing the Democrats for not taking the alternative media space serious. That's what I'm saying. I'm doing the thing that these guys always say that I never do. I'm doing the thing that they want me to do, criticizing the party. Their alternative media schedule was abysmal, okay? Obviously. I'm criticizing them for that. What else? What do you want me to say? Do you want me to say that Kamala did a great job? Like, what do you want me to say? Have to change between now and then. Because if we look at Donald Trump's numbers, they're not particularly great. But on immigration, I think he's still slightly above water. So if you have an electorate that's looking at Donald Trump's current policies right now, which I'm sure all of us agree are nightmarish, like dystopian in our minds, but when a slight percentage of the country views that favorably. Like, what needs to happen in the next like 4 years? Because there has to be some movement that starts like right now. Like, there need to be hearts and minds that are changed like right now.
I don't actually think that's correct about immigration. I'm sure it depends on the poll, but the average of polls that I saw has him even under.
We looked at the poll. It was like he's like 47% approval on immigration. So I think he was like 1 or 2 points underwater. So I was wrong about that.
Water on immigration at this point. And of course, it's highly dependent on what you're asking about, right? So if you ask specifically about the border policy, yes, that is one area where he's still above water. If you ask about Gilmar Abrego Garcia, you will get some of the lowest numbers you can possibly imagine.
What is this?
So I just wanted to put in that caveat that, first of all, I think he is somewhat underwater, at least according to the polling that I was seeing.
Oh, is he saying that she's cooking? Is that what this is?
Recently on immigration, but then also it really dramatically matters about what you are asking people about.
I think that's what he's saying.
Immigration policy. Mm-hmm. In terms of what needs to happen, I mean, I think you are in some ways already seeing it. You know, one thing that I think Democrats have lacked, and Kamala in particular, is Trump has his story of the world. I think it's an evil and untruthful story about how immigrants and, you know, trans people in the cultural elite are screwing you over, and that's why your life is a struggle, and that's why things are hard for you, or your community isn't what it used to be, or whatever your particular fears and concerns are. And I think the Democratic Party has failed to offer their own compelling version of that story. And I think Bernie and AOC have their version of that. And I think you've seen a grassroots organic.
Here's what I think is a difficult truth that I think a lot of people on the left are there. It's going to be difficult for them to grapple with this truth. Okay. I'm about to hit you with a truth nuke right now. Okay. It is true that for the longest time, actually, it's just a permanent feature of the Republican Party is to scapegoat immigrants. That is certainly true. Now, I don't think anybody would deny that, you know, outside of like right wingers. But they have been demonizing immigrants for decades. There's a nativist nationalist element that has sort of seized control of the right wing movement in recent years, and so a big part of being a right winger in America in 2025 is being sort of broadly anti-immigrant, being inherently skeptical of immigrants. That is true. So that scapegoating, that is a true thing that happened. Okay. However, we need to decouple the issue of immigration broadly with the border. You can be pro-immigrant and also acknowledge that the situation at the border on Biden's watch was untenable, and he waited too long to address the problem. I understand his thinking at the time was probably, you know, I only have a couple years to deliver on my agenda. And so he chose to focus that time on the stuff that he could get done, like chips and the IRA and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But the situation at the border was just not acceptable. Like, it's just, you know, when you had it peaked around like 300,000. I think the peak month was like 300,000 border encounters. And our system is not equipped. It just is not equipped for that many people. The system itself just buckles and just doesn't function properly at that level. That's not me saying that I think everybody that's coming across the border are dangerous criminals, but there has to be some measure of security. Most people agree with this sentiment. Most people think that there needs to be some sort of security measures there. There are practical things that you need to consider. Like, you do need to address drug trafficking and human trafficking. Like, you do need to think about these things. And so to that end, like, and you do need to vet people, for example. A system where we let everybody in without vetting them is not, that's obviously, I just feel like most people understand, like, that's probably not a great idea. This is what I'm trying to get at when I'm like trying to force the conversation about, okay, what's AOC's position going to be in 2028? Like, 2028 is like, one of the things that's going to shape the outcome of that election is how Democrats adjust to the Biden failure at the border. That was arguably, aside from the economy, that was definitely Biden's biggest vulnerability. People felt like he was not doing enough. And to a certain extent, they were right. Let's just be real. He waited until what, 6 months before the election before he finally, he just took too long. But I think like Vosh, for example, he described the immigration bill that they negotiated with the Republicans as fascist, and it's like, okay, what does fascist mean now? Like, what are we talking about?
Organic response from from Democratic base voters at this point, but more broadly as well. I mean, you see Bernie's response and the way he was received on the Flagrant podcast, et cetera. But they have a story that is coherent to people, that addresses a lot of those insecurities, that has the benefit of being much more accurate and much more.
There is no coherent story to make if you're to try to convince voters that we should have like less border security. There's just no coherent. There's just no, like, how do you make that case when we saw the kind of numbers we did when Biden was president?
More beneficial in terms of, not demonizing people and locking them up in a foreign gulag for life with no due process. And I think that's a critical part of what it's going to take. And, you've got a lot of energy, grassroots energy. You have people who are looking for someone who's going to fight. I don't think you're going to have a problem rallying around a candidate next time. And look, hopefully we get there. I mean, I am concerned about like what we're going to go through between now and then, and that we're going to even have elections that are free and fair. But hopefully the candidate will not be Donald Trump again. And I will say that I also feel
I do wish that I would have pushed Krystal a little bit here and pushed her on. You're talking about maybe not having elections in 2026, or I guess 2028. How come I didn't see you take the threat seriously when he was on the ballot? I do wish I kind of put, but I was just being mindful of my other co-hosts. Didn't want to like filibuster too much.
Somewhat hopeful because I don't think anyone else has the unique type of horrible but incredible charisma that Donald Trump does, and this hold on the electorate. I don't think a JD Vance pulls that off. I don't think a Don Jr. pulls that off, or whoever, the next anointed one.
Can we pause it? So it's interesting because I do want to pick.
Love Krystal Ball so much. She always has it right on the money. We've been saying this on our show too, in our own way. One of the things we talked about a week ago when we were on the Letter Hack pod was how we need to embrace narrative, right? We are human beings. We like stories. We need to have a story that we're told. We need to have a mission. We need to have a goal. We need to feel like we're in pursuit of something that we could believe in. We have to believe that, we're in a.
The progressives haven't been selling a story for the last, 8 years. Like, I don't, if it was that simple, then why have the results been so poor for progressives? They're not doing great right now. Progressives in Congress, it's just not, they've been struggling for the last 8 years. So like, they certainly have a story. Their story is like usually like the billionaire class is, ruining it for everyone. And that's kind of their story. The more class focused, the more focused on like class consciousness. They've already been doing that. So like, maybe there's something else here, but yeah.
Sense like all on the same page, right? We have to have something that unites us. It's the same way that everybody gets excited when their favorite sports team plays. It's like the story behind it. You could talk about how money is its own story. It's mythology, right? It's pageantry. These are things that as human beings, we absolutely need. And that's what Donald Trump understood inherently, right? That's why he was able to weaponize the 24-hour news cycle, make it completely free for him. He understood reality TV. He understood that people wanted reality TV to be real life, even though they knew it wasn't. And he played all of those things into his hand. Bernie Sanders sold the story of nostalgia, but it was the nostalgia inverted. It was like, hey, here is the, if we had unions again, here is if we, increase the minimum wage. I think he could have done more playing into that at a time, but it was like, let me paint a completely new vision for what our society could be for you. Let's have an economic.
Bernie could have done more. Am I crazy? I feel like every time I've ever heard Bernie open his mouth, it's been in the context of, we're the richest country in the world. We're the only developed nation in the world that doesn't give healthcare. You used to be able to get further with your paycheck than you do now. Things have gotten too expensive. I feel like that was like his whole deal, right?
Cultural, political revolution where the working class no longer is left behind. Don't you remember the 1950s when you could make a living and go on vacation on the Ford assembly line as a worker? Now that's gone. That's because of the oligarchy. That's because the 1% owns everything, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, he didn't deny that things are like bad and getting worse. Like Hillary in 2016, she was like, what do you mean? America's awesome. We're the best country in the world. Don't say America's bad. And Bernie was like, yeah, this country needs to be fixed. And also Trump said that. That's what was so appealing, about both of them, is they didn't gaslight people, because a lot of Americans, they, feel that things aren't as good as they used to be for whatever reason. And, neoliberal candidates like Hillary Clinton wanted to gaslight people and deny that fact.
I mean, again, you're not going to win. You are not going to win national elections by running around the country and saying that America sucks. People want to feel optimistic, just for better or worse. Even if it was true that America sucks, which I don't agree. Like, I think America's pretty dope. We have our problems, but like, I feel unbelievably grateful to live in this country. I think this country is dope. I'm just saying, generally speaking, I don't know if I would want to live anywhere. Maybe I would want to like move to Sweden or whatever, but like, it's pretty dope here. Okay. But yeah, running around the country, and it's interesting because like the new playbook for the Democrats, according to that Axios article, when they did like a summit where they talked about focus groups and polling or whatever, and like one of the things that they decided on is like whoever the 2028 nominee is, they should run on like a recaptured kind of patriotism. So, like, the strategists are saying to do the opposite of what these guys are saying. These guys think that they're like smarter than the strategists, and I guess like you can just run around saying like everything is just horrible and everything sucks and it could be so much better, but everything really fucking sucks right now. It's just, that is not something that like I think broadly connects with voters.
Candidates like Bernie Sanders were willing to admit and acknowledge.
Dare I say, that's the reason why Bernie lost in 2016. That's the reason that Bernie lost in 2020. I mean, I suppose when we're talking about Trump, I mean, there is like an element of like, but Trump's whole thing was like, the country sucks when the Democrats are in charge. When he's in charge, it's the greatest country in the history of the world. And it's the greatest time to ever live in the country because he's president. Like, that's it. There is like a patriotism there. It's just a really cynical kind of patriotism that is wholly dependent on whether or not he's in charge. But yeah.
That there were problems that needed to be fixed. And that's what people want to hear, is that, yeah, there is a problem, but it can be fixed. Not just like, oh yeah, let's keep gaslighting you with this status quo nonsense. No, we actually do need to fix things. And that's what Bernie understood. And that's why he was so successful, so that's 100% correct.
I'm sorry. Did they just say that Bernie was successful? I don't know what that means. He lost both primaries. And progressive politics has been on the back foot for the last like 8 years. So what success are we talking about?
This is an interesting portion too. They're going to talk a little bit about how a potential left-wing candidate like AOC will respond to the question of the border, and specifically, if they're asked about like open borders or abolishing ICE, how would they respond to that? So I think Krystal's answer here is really good too.
Sweet.
To, in very plain language, make it abundantly clear that they don't believe in open borders. So I guess to focus more on what Hutch said, Krystal, what would you expect or like, just off the cuff, for somebody like AOC to do with that one area where Donald Trump has persistent popularity? Yes, I believe in secure borders, but like, what would you like to see from her or hear from her in a situation like that?
I mean, I think if you go back to the messaging that Democrats,
we shouldn't run away from, like, Democrats shouldn't run away from this idea of like secure borders. Like, again, this is like probably like a 80% issue, 90% issue, and it doesn't make you a fascist if you can be pro-immigrant and then also say we should have like sensible security measures at the border. There's nothing incongruent about that.
only, abandoned, basically, that you have secure borders, you have a pathway to citizenship. And then I think you have to couple that with, I think it actually couples nicely at this point with real commitment to human rights and the rule of law, which is something that people have been deeply concerned with this Trump administration. On a practical level, one of the, and I'll let Pisco speak to this more than I can, but on a practical level, one of the things that you desperately need to do is surge the number of immigration judges, which if this administration was actually serious about adjudicating these, like, oh, we can't have 2 million trials. I mean, first of all, these are extremely perfunctory hearings. Like, they don't take a lot of time. And if you were...
Is it a fact or your opinion that progressivism has been losing ground? Well, in national politics, we compare how progressive candidates did in the last 4 election cycles to how moderate candidates did to how blue dog Democrats did. And when we make those comparisons, the progressive candidates have done measurably worse. Measurably worse. So that's just, you can't really escape the math. So, like, it's okay, cool. You know, Bernie got more young people, I guess, talking about like Medicare for all, but you know, I'd rather have congressional seats, like personally, than the ability to generate conversation online. That's like actually getting congressional seats is more important to me.
Serious about your plans here, you could increase the number of immigration judges. Instead, you've gone in the total opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so that's kind of a little bit in the weeds. But I also think you have to keep in mind that America has never been more favorable towards immigrants than they were during Trump's first term. Because it's one thing to think in the abstract, like, yeah, there's probably some people here that, you know, are committing crimes or taking jobs or whatever, and we should get them out of here. When you actually see,
and here I think you actually have a valid reason to be upset at Joe Biden, because I think with him like ignoring the border situation, he actually gave them ammunition. He made their job easier of demonizing immigrants. So like tactically, it was a very bad move. Pete Buttigieg even acknowledged that recently when he did an interview on the Bulwark, which I was going to try to find time to watch today, but it's taking us a long time to get through this video. He talked about this as well, but you know, like he made Republicans' jobs easier by kind of sort of like ignoring what had become like I don't know if they imagined it would get to that level. Like I think maybe like month to month it was like a frog in a boiling water situation where the numbers just kept going up in terms of border encounters. And I guess they just thought at some point the fever was going to break and it was going to go back down. And it just kept going up. It just kept going up. So yeah.
The reality of the mom and the, you know, of course, with this administration, like the U.S. citizen children with cancer who are being deported and what this actually looks like, people turn against it really quickly. So one of the things that has frustrated me is there's been this assumption that opinion on immigration is completely, you know, static and unchangeable, and there's no way you can persuade people or move them. I think Democrats really sort of, you know, got scared and like completely capitulated to a right-wing narrative on immigration. I think that was a big mistake. And you know, you can.
I mean, I just listen. The numbers at the border were not. The numbers are the numbers. Like they can craft the narrative around it, like they're letting in, you know, millions of or whatever. That's the narrative part. But those numbers were the numbers. Like those numbers were real. That when our system was totally overwhelmed for months and months and months and months and months, that was a real thing that happened. So like this idea that Democrats shouldn't address that or talk about it, especially when it comes to like if they have their own voters, guys, all of these Democratic senators and representatives, they were getting angry calls from their constituents. Like they have phones, they have answering machines, they take messages, people call their senators, and that's what they were hearing from their voters. That's what the numbers said. All the polls were saying that people were unhappy with the situation at the border. And I feel like their solution is to, I guess, tell people, no. It's actually not a problem. That's actually just a narrative. Okay, well, I mean, look, I agree that it's a narrative about like demonizing immigrants. That is certainly a narrative. But the issue itself is not a narrative. That is something that happened. So
you can already see the.
Yeah, I'm going to find one more quick timestamp real quick, Zach. Do you have anything to say on that while I do that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just that you can't fold on immigration, right? When people say we have an open border, we'll say we absolutely do not have an open border. Do you know how many people?
I mean, we don't, right? Like that's true. We don't have an open border, but we have a system that is not equipped for what it faced when Biden was president. You know, nobody would deny this. Nobody who like understands what these agencies do and like what they're prepared to deal with would suggest that like, oh yeah, no, like these guys are suggesting that in 2028 the nominees should just like, you guys tell me, I'm serious. You guys tell me if the nominee in 2028, if AOC gets up there and says, and if her reaction to that question, if her response to that question, like, what do you like Biden's border policy was widely criticized. It was one of his least popular aspects, one of the least popular aspects of his presidency. You know, how do you plan on not repeating that same mistake? I mean, that is going to be the question that they are asked, like for sure. And these guys are saying that AOC should get up there and say, well, it actually wasn't a problem. And everybody was just blowing it out of proportion. And we don't need to do anything to address that. Do you seriously think voters are going to hear her say that and go, you know what? Yeah. Now that I think about it,
people have applications that are outstanding to get into the United States? Do you know how difficult it is to immigrate legally? Do you know how many barriers there are? Do you not know that the Constitution and the American entire history as a nation has been predicated on allowing people to legally immigrate here? Do you know how that system has been completely destroyed? Right? We have to talk about that. The reality is what people are afraid of when they talk about immigration is they're afraid of the economy. Well, it's two things. They're afraid of more brown people coming to the country at times, and they're also afraid about the economy. And I feel like the best way to talk about immigration is to say, how come we have all of this animosity towards desperate people who are coming to America to just try and work?
All right, Andrew, keep it quick though, because Andrew, are you there? Hello?
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up? Yeah, let's make this quick though. Thank you for the dono. What was on your mind?
I got you. Whenever I only wanted to come up to comment, whenever we do this, I do like the TikTok live debate stuff. Whenever we do this, like when we get into the immigration topic and we do the numbers are the numbers, only comment or only saying anything because I heard you say that line. People will cite to the border encounters numbers without even considering the repatriations numbers during Biden's presidency, which cuts anywhere between a third and half of all the border encounters numbers. So you'll hear people say oh, we had 300,000 people cross the border this month when it was probably closer to 2015, something like that.
Yeah.
People don't let people cite to encounters ever without talking about repatriations in the same
Oh
month
no,
also.
yeah, that's certainly the case that they wildly misrepresent what those numbers actually mean. That's true. But
yep. By disgusting amounts, yeah.
It doesn't change the fact that I think the border situation was just untenable, and it was political kryptonite, and it was a self-inflicted wound, and it didn't need to happen. He could have done something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most poignant point I've ever heard you make, or the most right I've heard you, not that you're wrong off, most of what you say is pretty on point, but the most correct thing I've ever heard you say was a few minutes ago. And you said, Biden ignoring the border created a situation where Trump is now able to so easily demonize immigrants just across the board. And had he not done that, there is a chance we wouldn't be seeing, people in cages in El Salvador right now if, that didn't play out the way it did.
Maybe, but yeah, he made it easier for Trump to demonize immigrants. He made their jobs easier.
Sure did. All right. Well, thanks for letting me come up, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Card who want to pay their taxes. We have all this data about how much taxes people who are undocumented pay versus the amount of tax benefits they're able to receive.
They're doing the thing where they're not decoupling immigration from the border. That's what they're doing. They think that you can fix the situation at the border, or you can just change everybody's minds by saying, well, actually, immigrants are good. Most Democratic voters already think that immigrants are good, but most Democratic voters, even I think a majority of Democratic voters, I would have to look at the numbers again. Certainly, obviously, a huge majority of Republican voters, but I think even a slight majority of Democratic voters are pro-immigration. Objectively, they want more immigrants into the country year over year, and at the same time, they wanted more action taken in terms of border security. But these two kind of meld these issues together, and they present their own narrative that if you are at all concerned about border security, if you're at all concerned about the way that our systems are currently set up, that makes you, I guess, a fascist or right wing, and it's just a very kind of limited, narrow view of things.
Because they're undocumented, we know that they're paying far more in taxes than they're taking out in benefits. That's just a fact, right? We could talk about why there's never any punishment for the people who own these major corporations that not just employ, but continuously rely on undocumented workforce so that they can exploit them, so that they can pay
again, these are all valid points.
So that they can skirt the IRS.
Not that these points aren't valid.
That belong to the government, right? We never see any takedowns against these guys. These are the kinds of things that the Democrats need to be prioritizing. We need to talk about how, hey, we need to stop making
Jay, thanks so much for 18 months.
Labor workforce compete with Mexico, compete with these dirt poor countries, and drive down the value of the American hour of labor, right? And so then, as you do that, you'll decrease the incentive for offshoring. You'll increase the penalty for hiring undocumented workers without being draconian and denying asylum. You can still go through all of the standard processes of allowing people to come in to the country. And I also think it is popular if you say, hey, you know what, if you've been in this country.
No, the David Hogg video, I don't know what you're talking about.
All of this shit. Well, guess what? Our country was founded on being open and embracing immigration. You know, give us your tired, you're poor, you're hungry, whatever the fuck the Statue of Liberty says. You know what I mean? We're going to embrace that. We want you guys to become naturalized citizens. We have to move the ball forward because.
Wait, are they just? I don't want to mischaracterize their argument, but are they just saying we should have open borders? That's what it kind of sounds like, right? Like they were hearkening back to an era where we didn't have the kind of restrictions on immigration that we have now. But I mean, obviously in the post 9/11 era, I mean, good luck with that.
The last thing I'll say before we play what Krystal has to say is that at the same time, you have Republicans complaining about birth rates. You have Republicans complaining about population.
Open borders mean different things to different people. I mean, that's fair.
It
sounded like they were saying that we should go back to the system that we had before, which is essentially open borders, right? Like
people complaining about how, oh my gosh, we're not having enough families in this country. Well, guess what, dude? If you're worried about the population,
Edward, I see you on Twitter.
A bunch of people that want to come and live in America and work hard and have the American dream here.
Yeah, that's a great point. Although I have a feeling that's not going to resonate with a lot of the people that make that argument, Zach.
Yeah.
No, but again, like Democrats are already pro-immigrant. They're already pro-immigrant. Like I just,
obvious reasons.
Potentially not.
Either way, this is a great answer about ICE specifically.
Enforcement agency, but like the shit we're seeing from ICE now.
I mean, ICE was created. ICE was created by the Bush administration. This is an organization that hasn't been around for 100 years or anything like that. I mean, it's not as if it's this crazy institution similar to the Department of Homeland Security, right? I mean, I think that what's troubling to me about ICE and why I think that abolish ICE language, I mean, on one hand, like you guys are kind of referencing, it could be popular at this point because ICE seems to be enacting so much crazy stuff, is that look, as a government employee, whether you're a cop for the federal government or you're just a Social Security Administration worker, you have a duty to follow the law. Right? You cannot follow illegal orders, even if it's from the president. The difficulty of being a federal employee and swearing an oath is that you might be in the awkward position of having to tell your boss, who might ultimately be the president, I'm not going to do this, right? And when I see video after video of groups of ICE officers and Homeland Security people just fucking black bagging people, all those people need to be fired by the incoming administration, who's a Democratic administration, ideally, obviously.
Yeah.
These are people who they're saying, I simply don't give a shit about the law, right? And whether that means abolishing ICE or pulling a Doge and firing half of the ICE officers who are acquiescing to this ridiculous illegal immigration regime, something clearly radical needs to be done.
Well, you're talking about reforming ICE, or ICE, yeah, which I'm sure everybody would agree with. But even when we go back to like the number back in 2018 was only a quarter of Democrats. This is during like the peak anti-Trump kind of pro-immigration wave, that pendulum swing. It was only a quarter of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. That's not to say that they had a favorable opinion of ICE. It says 57% of Democrats viewed the agency negatively for obvious reasons. There was like family separation at the time. It was horrible. But when AOC is asked this question, she's going to have to give like a substantive answer for what that actually looks like. And
look, I hear your concerns on the political point. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it will be popular by the time we get to the end of like the horrors of this administration. I can just tell you that I think they've been vindicated and I think they're correct. I think it's a rogue agency. And this gets back to like the asymmetry between the Republicans and
I mean, like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Like, if we want to argue like the morality of it, I think it's immoral to, enable Republicans to win and then do worse things with ICE than, I mean, like what Trump's doing with ICE right now is like horrible. They're not prioritizing high value, like violent criminals with ICE right now. They're just taking any kind of tips that they can get about anyone here illegally. And they're deporting people with no criminal records or anything. They're sending people with no criminal records to fucking CCOT in El Salvador. I think it would be better to have a Democrat in charge, of ICE. And you're not going to see that kind of stuff. When Biden was president, he focused on violent criminals, national security threats. When Obama was president, he focused on violent criminals, national security threats. When Donald Trump is president, they are going after your tío, your abuela, your prima, whomever. And so this idea that like Well, I don't know if it's popular, but I think it's the right thing to do to run on abolishing ICE. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do with that when, like, you know, if I had to guess right now, polling for abolishing ICE is probably like 8%, you know, at most. I don't even think it's double digits, right?
The Democrats, how many, like, Republicans just came in and slashed a bunch of agencies, and, you know, and we're like watching this one that is completely rogue, and everybody's terrified to say, hey, you know, maybe we should do something about that. But they'll just come in, hey, you know, kids in Africa.
I just want to ask, you know, like, all right, let's game this out. Let's play the tape out. You know, let's play the tape out. It's 2029, and President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has just been inaugurated, and with the stroke of a pen, she dismantles ICE. Day one. Like, what do you think it looks like in the country? Like, what do you think the discourse is going to look like? How do you think voters are going to respond to this? That's a serious question. I mean, we should think about these things. Like, this matters, you know?
Bald fraud.
This is like what we do with like campaigns and elections. It's like it's a national conversation, and like, what does that actually look like? You know?
And I was so glad to see Governor Tim Walz come out and correctly identify ICE as the modern day Gestapo the other day. He has the right approach. He has the right approach, just as Krystal said. And Hutch, meanwhile, manifests everything that is wrong with the Democratic Party. Well, we could do that, but in 2018, even at the height of the pro-immigration message, only 57% of Democrats felt unfavorably towards the organization. So therefore, we should probably tread lightly.
The more relevant metric to point to, or the more, metric, is that the word?
All right, listen, okay, listen.
The more relevant number to look at was that, again, at its height, at the pro-immigration wave, the anti-Trump pro-immigration wave that the country went through following the Muslim ban and the family separation policy and all that, at its height, peak woke era, 25% of Democrats, okay, that's just Democrats, okay, 25% of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. What do you think the national numbers are? Probably not even double digits, okay? Are we seriously proposing that the next president do something that, 8% of the country, like 92% of the country don't approve of? What are we even talking about here? I think like this fantasy that leftists have is that they're finally going to get a progressive candidate, and then the candidate is finally going to win, and they're going to go in and they're just going to do stuff. And then when they do stuff, everyone's going to see how awesome progressive policy is, and everyone's just going to change their minds, and we're all just going to be progressives. And 15% of the countries, there's only going to be like 15% of people that oppose us. It's just all we got to do is just get into the seat, get into power, and then do things that are wildly unpopular. And everyone's just going to change their minds, and everyone's just going to be, and it's going to be great, and everything's going to be great. Like, give me a break. Like, spare me with the moralizing here, okay? You do have to consider things practically if you're doing like an analysis, okay? You obviously have to think about these things. Their model that's not how the world works. They think it's as simple as just like, all it takes is just one like really inspiring person. And, everyone's going to, we're going to go from single digit approval for dismantling ICE and getting rid of it altogether. We're going to go from that to like 90% of the country approves because AOC is going to be good on a microphone or something. And I just, they present it as though like I'm doing this immoral thing by pointing to like really practical considerations that obviously we should think about these things, but
No, fuck no. People need a bold message, and saying that we're going to not just reform ICE, but fucking abolish it, get rid of it, because they're the modern day Gestapo is the appropriate way to go about it. That's how Trump and the Republicans got power.
I don't think ICE was the modern day Gestapo when Biden was president. Okay. Dogs in YouTube chat says, I can't imagine your take during the civil rights movement. I'm starting to crack a little bit today. Demon Hutch is starting to emerge. I kind of hate you guys sometimes. Like, I actually hate you guys. I want to win, okay? I want things to change and get better. and I want to win. Okay. And I think I'm asking questions, very fair questions, that I think 99% of the country asks themselves. You know, I want to stand on principle. Okay. I want to stand on business and boldly say that whoever the next president is probably shouldn't do an executive order that like 5% of the country approves of. I just want to be on record as saying, I don't think that is a good idea. I think that is probably political suicide. All right. I don't even think you're making it out of the later. I don't even think you're making it fucking 2 months into the primary proposing such a thing, let alone ascending to the presidency before you can actually do something like that. The president gets to more or less set the policy of what the agencies are like, you know, like they hire people to become a part of their cabinet. And, you know, I think a much better answer to the question of like, what do we do about ICE is like, well, we need to elect someone as president who will appoint someone who will not like send people to CCOT, even though they've never even committed a crime in the country over the last like 20 years. All right. Oh man, you guys, you know, we were spared the primary process in 2024. I'm telling you guys, 2028 is going to be so nasty. It's going to be such a nasty primary. They're going to call Pete Buttigieg a fascist, and you know, it's just going to be crazy. It's just going to be insane.
In their messaging, Democrats, it's long past due them, you know, taking a page out of that book.
Yep.
We can watch a couple more seconds of this, but I know we have the Piers Morgan fired up and ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Maddie, did I thank you? I did, right? Thank you.
Now because we just slash USAID and they don't give a shit and they just keep moving. It's just wildly different over there in what the risks that they're willing to take, I guess, and the insane actions they're willing to do.
I think also the permission structure within and outside the party is one of my like recurring theses on my channel, is just bitching about the double standard between the right and the left and their political proxies and the Republican and Democratic Party. And
Yep. And Josiah is 100% right to be upset about that. I was actually I was watching for the first time last night a film from 2006 called Old Joy. And it was set in 2006, obviously the Bush administration. And throughout the movie, occasionally in the character, you know, in his car, he'll be listening to the radio. And I don't know what, you know, podcast or radio, or not, I guess podcast didn't exist, but, you know, he's listening to the radio, you know, there's some liberals talking about shit. And it's like they were having the same fucking
the fuck was that
conversation that we hear constantly now about the Democrats, and you know how they can't properly stand up to the Bush administration and how they always want to cower to the Republicans on messaging instead of really going after the corporate crooks like they should. It was like crazy. You know, I'm like, no wonder people eventually get tired and tune out of this bullshit, because it's a never ending carousel of just like the Democrats sucking and failing to meet the moment. It's wild. Great movie though. Definitely check that one out. It was really good. But yeah, and just,
I mean, come on, talk about failing to meet the moment. Are we seriously saying that the left flank has done that in the last like 8 years?
100% right to be upset about that. And, you know, shout out to Krystal for coming in that Zoom call or that, you know, live stream and basically making all those self-identified liberals, except for Hutch, maybe agree with everything she said. You know what I'm saying, Zach? And that's real proof. Like, not that I have anything against the folks over at Lib and Learn. You know, I love Josiah, love Pisco. But, you know, I think that's proof that self-identified liberals are for the most part embracing these radical ideas, these notions that, yeah, it's time for the Democrats to actually go left.
Oh, 100%. And I even remember one time we were talking to Josiah and he was like, you know, I always considered myself a progressive until I started arguing with you guys. And then I was like, maybe I am a liberal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think he does get down with all of.
I don't know if Josiah thinks that the next Democratic nominee should run on abolishing ICE. Like, I don't even know if Pisco thinks that. Maybe Econoboy.
These progressive ideas. And I think the big albatross for liberals, the one thing that holds them back is
Hutch.
The Hutch mentality, the destiny mentality, which is, oh, we can't do any of those things. That would be really.
That's actually not. So that's 3 times on the destiny counter. They didn't get to 7, but that's actually not what I think at all. I actually think that good things can happen and do happen when we elect Democrats and actually give them power. Like that, I am not saying better things can't happen. I am saying they do happen. They have happened.